Alright guys, we're back in my garage for another video, and today's video is going to start with a quote, because a wise man once told me that there's nothing wrong with asking a stupid question, but stupid questions do have an expiration date. Now, of course, all he meant by that was, there's nothing wrong with trying to learn, but at a certain point, people are probably going to expect you to know certain things. And if you don't know them, they're going to wonder why you never asked, why you never tried to figure it out. And I do feel like some of that is part of the reason why a lot of you guys watch my videos. You're just kind of curious about different topics, but maybe you're scared to ask those questions or not sure where to go for that information. So in this video, I'm going to try to tackle some of the more common questions or things that people are afraid to ask. And hopefully you find this video useful. There's no real agenda or topic of discussion, just a bunch of commonly asked questions. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So I've got a list here on my laptop, and we're going to kind of just go through some of the different things that I know a lot of people have asked me in the past. The first thing we're going to talk about are a bunch of different acronyms. So probably the biggest, most confused acronym I've seen is BM3. Now BM3 is a tuning platform for the B58 vehicles. BM3 is one of the top three, BM3, MHD, and MG Flasher. They all were released back in 2018 and 2019, and they're pretty much the most popular platforms today. Now BM3 is boot mode. Yes, it's pronounced boot mode, not boot mod, not boot mod 3 or boot moddy. It's pronounced boot mode. It's actually a play on words because the term boot mode comes from, computer science. It's basically what you call a program that starts up your operating system. So when you turn on your computer, the boot mode loads up your operating system, whether it's Windows or whatever the case may be. So it's a play on words. They changed the E to a 3, but that's basically what it is. Now, another acronym is PTF, because a lot of people ask me questions about boot mode, and I usually refer them to PTF. I say reach out to them, send them an email, and the question is always, what's PTF? Well, PTF is the creator of the boot mode software. PTF just stands for Pro Tuning Freaks, and that's the overall company that owns the software. So if I tell you reach out to PTF, it's the same thing as just saying reach out to boot mode customer service, basically. Now, another common question that I get is OTS. What does OTS mean? So OTS just stands for off the shelf. There are a lot of different things that you can get in OTS form, but most commonly we use it on our platform as referring to different tunes. So they have stage 1, stage 2, stage 2 plus, pro, max, whatever they want to call it. And all of these tunes are just packages that are created a la carte for you to download and upload to your car. It won't be set up for your specific combination of fuel quality, conditions, different mods that you might have on your car, but they do kind of package them together for some of the most popular modifications. So it's really common for people to flash an OTS map on those major 3 platforms. The only one that doesn't really offer it is Ecutech. If you use Ecutech, you're going to have to get a custom tune regardless, but the OTS maps are a good way to kind of get you rolling with, different setups that you might have on your car. Now, another one that kind of pains me because I've seen this multiple times and come from platforms where this was messed up as well is MK5. So when people are referring to the modern Supra, a lot of times people will say an MK5 Supra. MK5 stands for Mark V. It's really not an acronym, it's just a shortened term. So if you had somebody that said their name was Dr. Johnson, you wouldn't shorten it and say Dr. Johnson, right? You'll say doctor because that's what the, shortened form represents. So in this case, it's the same thing. MK represents the term Mark, and so 5 is just Mark V, basically the 5th generation. That's what it represents. So you have Mark III, Mark IV, and now we have the Mark V Supra. Also, even though it's called the A90 now, I think a lot of people think it's related to F30, E46, all these terms that we've had on BMW platforms for a while. but this is specific to the Toyota platform. So the Mark IV Supra was the A80, the Mark III Supra was the A70. So the A90 just came, next in line for the 5th generation Supra. And another thing is A91 is not a new generation of Supra, and it is not the designation for 6-port Supras. All of the current A90 Supras are basically the current generation. You have 2-port and 6-port versions. The A91 versions are the special editions. So originally when the A91 was announced, it just kind of had like some carbon fiber trim pieces. They also have the new A91 MT, which is offered in specific color combinations and things like that. But pretty much all of those options are available on their own. Like you don't have to get an A91 to get a manual. You don't have to buy an A91 to get a 6-port Supra. All of the A90 Supras come in different versions, but you can also get the special editions that are designated as A91. So I know a lot of people say A90s are 2 ports and A91s are 6 ports, and that's not necessarily the case. I even made this mistake in the past myself. Again, just to be clear, A90s come in 2-port and 6-port versions. There were no A91s until 2021, so it is true that all A91s are 6-port, but just because your vehicle has a 6-port cylinder head, that doesn't make it an A91. Now, another one is DP. I think this is one, if you guys are getting this confused, you might need to delete your browser history, but DP just stands for downpipe, so you can get those in catted or catless versions, but if somebody says they have a DP on their car, it is a downpipe. HPFP stands for high pressure fuel pump, and LPFP stands for low pressure fuel pump. One is on the engine and one is in the tank. So if you see a code on your car that is related to the low pressure fuel system, it is not the fuel pump on top of your car. You have 2 different pumps, and the codes usually refer to either the high pressure fuel or the low pressure fuel. So make sure you're paying attention to that. Now, the last thing is TU. So we know there is a B58 TU, but that's not the only TU in the BMW lineup. TU is just an acronym that represents technical update. So there are a lot of different TU versions on different engines in the BMW lineup. Just on the B58, when we say TU, we know what we're referring to. But if you say TU anywhere else, it could represent a lot of different things. There's an N63 TU and just a lot of different models that get technical updates throughout their life cycle. Now, next we'll talk about the B58 generations. And if you want a whole lot more detail than you probably care to know, I made a whole video that talks about the differences and how you can know which one is in your vehicle. So be sure to check that out if you want more detail. But right now we basically have 3 different generations of the B58. The first generation is like the one that's in my 440i, early 340is, basically all the S-Series BMWs that came with B58 engines. The Gen 2 is what we see in most of the current BMW lineup, so M340is, M440is, Supras, those all have the TU engines. And the Gen 3 is the latest one that is currently only available in 7 Series and X7 vehicles. Now, keep in mind that Gen 2 does have a 2-port and 6-port version, like we said earlier, but I've seen some people that are maybe newer to the platforms not understanding that a 2-port B58 is not a Gen 1 B58. There are 2 different versions of a Gen 2, and one did come before the other, but they're both considered a B58 TU or a second generation B58. So the first gen only came in 6-port. Another thing that people ask is if the Supra B58 is different than the BMW versions, and it is not. I'm sorry to tell you, but it's the exact same engine. Every version of the B58 that was available in a Supra was available in a BMW before, with the same amount of horsepower, the same amount of torque. So I know there's a lot of marketing behind this, and I'll probably talk about it more in a future video, but every B58 that's available in a Supra is from a BMW platform. It's a BMW engine. Now that we know all the differences, a lot of people are wondering what parts are compatible. And one thing I will say is if you have the same generation of B58, everything that attaches to the actual physical engine is virtually the same. So turbos, charge pipes, intake manifolds, all of those things that bolt directly to the engine, even downpipes, are pretty much the same across all the platforms. I know some people that are running a Supra downpipe on a Gen 1 B58 and vice versa, so pretty much all of them fit. The main differences arise when you're looking at parts that mount to the actual engine bay. So like an intake, even though that bolts up to the turbo, it also mounts in the corner of the engine bay. and different vehicles have different engine bay layouts and different sizes and mounting locations. So that's where a lot of the differences arise. Also, things with your fuel system, like a high pressure fuel pump, will have a different line because that fuel line goes back into the engine bay. So even though the physical fuel pump will fit the same, the line that runs fuel to the fuel pump will be a little bit different. So those are just some things to consider. I will say one of the most common ones that most people are swapping parts between are like the F Series 1, 2, 3, and 4 Series vehicles. Those all pretty much have the same engine bay, so all of the parts can be swapped between them. If it's a 440i, it'll fit an M240i and vice versa. However, one thing to consider is that X-Drive cars can have a different oil pan. Other than that, pretty much everything is the same. You don't need a special downpipe or any other modifications for X-Drive cars. Also, the Z4 and Supra have pretty much everything the same in the engine bay. So if you're a Supra owner trying to find somewhere to buy parts, everything that you're looking up for Toyota specific parts is like back ordered or whatever. You can check out sites like FCP Euro, ECS Tuning, etc., and just put in a Z4 instead of a Supra, and you'll find a lot of the OEM parts that you might need for different kinds of maintenance and service. It's going to be the exact same for your car. Another question that I get is if the B58 is twin turbo, or people see my car and they're like, oh, you converted it to a single turbo setup. And the B58 is single turbo to begin with. I know the engine cover says twin power, but that actually refers to twin scroll technology, not a twin turbo setup. So it's kind of marketing. It makes it sound like it's twin turbo or more powerful. But in reality, the twin scroll turbo does just help it spool faster and run more efficiently. So it is a nice advantage to have. But outside of that, the B58 is a single turbo from the factory. So that also means that any bolt-ons that you're putting on your car, there's only going to be one of them. So you don't have to say down pipes, charge pipes, intakes, pretty much all of those parts that you would probably want to add an S from because, maybe you own an N54 in the past, an S55, whatever. In this case, there's only one. You have a down pipe, a charge pipe, and intake. Everything is singular on our platform. So I know that's kind of a pet peeve for some people, but just keep that in mind. Now, the last thing I want to talk about just for fun is a lot of people are trying to understand how rare their B58 is, if any special combination of, options or setups makes it unique and adds value to it. In the grand scheme of things, it doesn't. I know we have a lot of B58 enthusiasts out there, people that want to get into a B58 car, but most of them aren't like me, where they're just out there looking for specific B58 vehicles because they love the engine. In most cases, people settle on a color, certain options and things because they plan on upgrading it in the future anyway. But there are a couple things that are cool to look into. So first of all, I think it's really interesting that out of the whole 4 Series lineup, the most awkward 4 Series was the highest seller, and that's the Grand Coupe. It's really weird for me to say that it's the 4-door version of the 2-door version of a 4-door car, but that's what the Grand Coupe is, right? It's got the big hatch, it's got the coupe kind of design and shape, but it has 4 doors. It actually sold more than the coupe and the convertible combined. That's actually across the entire lineup. That's a part of the reason why you can't get an M8 coupe anymore. They axed that because the Grand Coupes were the only ones that are really selling. And now everybody's making these 4-door coupes. Like even you can buy a Honda Civic with a hatchback now. So that's just a really popular design. It is what it is. I prefer the coupe personally, but I just thought it was interesting that the Grand Coupe sold more than both of the other versions of a 4 Series. Now, also the manual transmission is obviously an extremely rare option. I've got a manual in my 440i. Although they're not as fast as an automatic transmission car, it is something that I think a lot of people look for. You can get it in rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, but it was an extremely low runner, and that's a part of the reason why the new G-Series cars aren't available with manual transmissions. Now, probably the most rare F-Series BMW you can get is the ZHP version, which actually did exist. It was only for one model year, and it's estimated that only 100 units were sold. They had them both in manual and automatic transmission versions in a bunch of different paint colors. However, one thing to note here is this is really just an option package. So it came with the M Performance LSD, the MPPSK tune, and pretty much all of the M Performance bits on the car. So the front lip, the spoiler, different things like that. all of those parts can be retrofitted in the aftermarket. You could have even optioned your car with all of those pieces and it just wouldn't be called a ZHP. But, it is something that's kind of cool that BMW deliberately made 100 vehicles with these options. But I think nothing is more rare than the absolute rarest B58 vehicle out there, and that is the Morgan Plus 6. So this is a vehicle that if you saw it on the road, you probably wouldn't expect it to have a modern BMW engine, but it absolutely does. There are two different versions. The Plus 4 has the B48, and the Plus 6 has the B58. So, yeah, I haven't seen one before. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm pretty confident that this is the rarest B58 out there. And unless yours looks like that, I wouldn't try to convince anybody that yours is more valuable because it's a specific color or anything else. It's just a nice platform to have fun with, but these really aren't limited vehicles, so don't expect them to have any kinds of crazy value in the future. So yeah, I think those are pretty much all of the most common questions, at least the ones that I could think of off the top of my head. If you have any other questions that you want to ask, feel free to send me a DM, email, whatever. I've got most of my contact information in the description of my videos, so feel free to reach out, and maybe I'll make a part 2 to this as I get more questions in the future. But yeah, I think that's it for this video. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below. I haven't seen one before. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm pretty confident that this is the rarest B58 out there.